Hello, this is Andrew Woods, Preston North End fan. I'm doing this podcast, first such attempt, in response to the local media, who I think have been letting down North End fans because they've not really been asking the hard-hitting questions of Alex Neil. In fact, at times, it's been almost sycophantic. I think is the best word to actually use. So by me calling this XtremePNE, I'm going to try and go to the areas where we're addressing these issues with a little bit more vigour. Albeit I don't have Alex Neil to explain his tactics and his team selections. One thing I do want to mention is the Wycombe FA Cup debacle over the weekend. Can't let that one go. And again, I'm hugely disappointed with Alex Neil's comments after the game, because it looks to me as though he'd set up Story, Bayliss and Earl for a big fall. Anybody who read his comments or heard his comments after the game, he was specifically making the point that he'd been asked the question, why don't you play certain young players? And his response was, today you saw why. That for me is not man management at its best. In fact, it's as if he had some kind of puerile agenda where he's setting up these three young lads for the fall. And it looks as though he wants them to take the complete blame for what was truly an awful performance at Wycombe. In fact, it was unacceptable. As for his allegation being that the team were outthought, that's true. They were also tactically outthought by a superior Gareth Ainsworth, and contrary to what Alex Neil said, they were out-footballed. They were bullied off the ball. Question I've got for Alex Neil is, there he is attacking these three young lads with a lot of potential, but now they're going backwards. I have a question, which is just what ideas is the manager and the coaches, what ideas are they putting into the heads of these young lads that all three of them have gone backwards so badly it's beyond belief? It's a bit of a coincidence that all three have gone backwards, so I think there's something strange going on here behind the scenes that we don't know about. The question I've got is, does any of Alex Neil's venom get directed towards Alan Brown, who came on at the start of the second half? He had 45 minutes in which to impact that game and try and turn it around as the captain. And what we saw was, once again, a below-par performance. In fact, one of his shots, when an opportunity was created for him, not only did it not hit row Z, it actually cleared the stadium and made it to the outside car park. That was Alan Brown for you. Similarly with Sean Maguire, didn't notice he was on the pitch. To summarise that performance yesterday at Wycombe, debacle at Wycombe, there was only one player to emerge with any credibility, and that was Rees up front, where he was taking players on, beating them and running at pace. The only one. Enough said about the Wycombe game. Now moving on to the actual tactics deployed by Alex Neil. This being basically featuring one forward up front, one recognised striker. That's when played at home as well as away. At home, I consider that an insult and showing contempt for fans who are paying their hard-earned dosh to be entertained. I'm of the generation that witnessed the likes of Mackin and Cresswell, Mackin and Healy, Elwes and Bruce, Robinson and Bruce, Saville and Wilkinson, all of whom were twin strike partners, and they could bang in individually 20 goals a season. That's what I was brought up on. What's happening now is we've just got one guy up front on his own. That for me is not football that I want to watch. This is made even worse. It's compounded by the fact that we no longer at North End play with any wingers with any genuine skill. What do I mean by that? I mean wingers who can attack with pace and actually have some trickery in their locker, where they can actually skin a defender and leave him grounded. When was the last time we saw that? A number out there will say, oh, we've got Tom Barkhuizen. Unfortunately for us, we only see Barkhuizen turning it on at about 1 in every 6 games. And then many games he just disappears. Or as we saw recently, in the home defeat against Nottingham Forest. He missed 3 sitters. He should have had a hat-trick in that game. He missed them. Barkusen, tremendous pace. We don't see him using it enough. Why? So this brings me back to tricky wingers that I want to see. Corners. Well, what have we got going on here? We've got Alex Neil using his dogma of demanding that all 10 outfield players come back into the penalty area to cover the corner. Consequently, the corner comes over, we boot it upfield, we've got nobody up front, and the ball comes straight back to us, putting us under further pressure. Every man and his dog knows that if you leave one forward on the halfway line when a corner's been taken, you are automatically going to take out of the equation 2 opposing defenders. But he doesn't do it. This comes back to what I'd argue that Alex Neil has. He has developed an ultra negative mindset. And if Alex Neil is listening to this and he doesn't like what I'm saying, contact me and I'll take you on in live debate. I'll challenge you about your tactics. I've tried that before through Peter Ridsdale, but apparently he wasn't up for it. A key word that Alex Neil keeps using is transitions. Obviously, he's been off on a management course, and the buzzword that managers are now using is transitions. In other words, the switch from defence into attack. Well, let me tell you, the situation here is that his transition, as he calls it, is slow, ponderous, and predictable. Consequently, we have a team that when they laughingly go on the attack, when they're confronted by an opposing player, normally they are turning around and passing the ball backwards or passing the ball sideways. That comes back to an ultra negative mindset that I'm referring to. What I want to see is players with genuine skill who can actually go past defenders. Put us fans on the edge of our seats, a little bit of excitement, entertainment. Because watching your team, watching North End, supporting North End, it shouldn't be a test of endurance, which sadly is what it's been for the last 12 months. One could even argue for the last 18 months. It should be something that's entertaining and enjoyable, and you can't wait for the next match to come up. That's when we're allowed to actually go and see the games. But that's not the case for me at the moment. We've got a team that is just dull, boring and turgid to watch. And there's nobody can convince me otherwise. We might occasionally get a 10-minute spell when there's a nice bit of football played. It looks fluid, players are linking up. But that's few and far between. And it takes me on to another area, which is how is it that with so many games, time after time, we see Alex Neil set up his team. They turn in a turgid first half performance as if they've written it off. And then they might come out in the second half and then start playing in a reasonable manner, a little bit more entertaining. Why is that so? What is it about his tactics that allows this to happen so often? Anyway, that's enough about the tactics. Moving on to the players themselves. Stockley up front. Centre forward, 6'5", big unit, as they say. The problem is, he plays with back to goal, as instructed by Alex Neil. This means he's a target man, obviously. The long ball is played up to him, and his primary function is to lay the ball off. My question being, if we've only got one forward playing, one recognised striker, who the hell is Stockley laying the ball off to? He's not laying it off to any recognised strikers who can bang the goal in the back of the net regularly. It's been laid off to midfielders who aren't primarily goal scorers. Now, if you look at the old footage when Stockley was playing for Exeter City, they play with a conventional winger, as I describe it, who will get down the wing, get the crossover, and the fundamental difference being that there would be Stockley running into the box, facing the goalkeeper, could actually see the whites of the eyes of the goalkeeper, and he would normally be able to finish off with some aplomb. And that's why he was banging in something like 18 or 20 goals in a season, and he won the Golden Boot. Albeit, I must say, that was at a low level. We all know that. But he should still have been able to score more goals than he's done at Preston. And perhaps we're all being a little bit unfair on him because I'm not a fan of his, but perhaps if we had played with more conventional winger style play, crosses coming in, facing goal, he would have been banging the ball in the back of the net a lot more frequently. Wingers with genuine skill. That being, as I've alluded to already, pace and trickery. Well, the players we did have who had those features, Daryl Horgan, Barker and Ginnerly, have all been cleared out of the club by Alex Neil. Horgan was no world beater, but I remember vividly that first game he came on against Arsenal in the FA Cup. I think it was the second half. First time he touched the ball, he didn't turn around and pass the ball back when he was confronted by a defender. He went for him and he skinned him. Consequently, the fans were put on the edge of their seats. They were thinking, my gosh, what have we got here? This guy looks like he might have something. Barker, from Manchester City on loan, similar type of player, scored a glorious goal at Leeds, and then he wasn't really given enough opportunities to prove himself and to sustain that form. Josh Ginnerly, good young lad, signed from Walsall, 22 years old, never given any chance. In fact, when he did perform well, albeit against Chorley in a friendly, I think it was pre-season, he banged in a hat-trick. His reward for that was nowhere in sight thereafter. And then at one stage, Alex Neil deigned to actually give the lad his chance, this being a right winger with pace, who's got a bit of trickery about him as well. Against Hull City in what I call the old League Cup, Neil played Ginnerly at left full back. What was that all about? Notwithstanding that, he got a few good tackles in and he showed that he had good composure. He was confident on the ball and he was able to hit some very good passes down the wing. Unfortunately for him, on the end of those passes was Andre Green from Villa on loan, who was neither use nor ornament. Flair players. Have we got any flair players? What has happened to them? Well, I would argue we do have them, but they haven't been used. We've got Josh Harrop, Tom Bayliss and Ethan Walker. Josh Harrop, hardly used at all this season. Last season, he'd scored 8 goals. So he knows where the back of the net is. Plus, he has the ability to make things happen. But unfortunately, he wasn't an Alex Neil signing. He's not favoured by the manager. And so it looks as though there's an agenda playing out here where he's being forced out of the club. Similar situation with Bayliss. He and Ginnerly were, it's apparent to me now, were obviously Peter Ridsdale signings. And on that one, although many of you North End fans would say that's terrible, I would say that Peter Ridsdale called it right in both instances. 2 good, young, quality players who could have been developed and worth a lot of money. Unfortunately, neither has been given the chance, albeit Bayliss was thrown into the Wickham FA Cup debacle, and all too soon Alex Neil was out there attacking the 3 young lads of Story, Earl and Bayliss. It was obvious he was referring to them, and he will now have destroyed their confidence completely. It looks to me as though the manager is trying to force Bayliss out of the club as well. This is contrary to what I was told by Coventry City fans I've talked to. They expressed amazement that he hasn't established himself in the North End team. I was told he was by far the best young prospect their academy had produced in many years, and they were tipping him for the Premiership. Question being, what manner of tactics, what manner of coaching has been placed into the head of Bayliss and Harrop that they have deteriorated to such a degree? Is Alex Neil overcomplicating things when it's basically quite simple? For example, in the Wickham game, it looked to me as though Bayliss was playing over on the left-hand side. He's a central midfielder, supporting the forwards. It didn't look like he was playing that role at all. In fact, I can't tell you what the team formation was yesterday. It just didn't make any sense. Similarly, with regards to Ethan Walker, 18-year-old winger. He was recalled from Carlisle, put on the bench against Wycombe and didn't play. And it was apparent to me during the course of that game that there were gaping holes down the flanks for us to attack. We didn't attack. We couldn't exploit those opportunities as they emerged because we weren't playing with any wingers. Ethan Walker would have addressed that problem. Although again, I mentioned a word of caution here. I remember seeing Walker in the youth team as a 16-year-old when he had great natural ability, very tricky winger. And I've noticed when I've seen him in recent games, when he was given the opportunity, that particular aspect of his game wasn't quite there as it used to be. It brings me back to the coaching and Alex Neil and his ultra-negative mindset. Is he overcoaching these players? Is he actually oppressing and crushing whatever spark they have, whatever spark of individuality is being crushed by his demand that the players track back? I don't want to see wingers tracking back all the time. I think their primary function is to attack and to cause problems, and indeed for North End to impose their style of play on the opposition and not the other way round. I think Alex Neil's got that one the wrong way round completely. Man management of the North End players. Well, as I've just alluded to before, I'd say after that Wycombe game, his comments will have completely demoralised young Story, Earl and Bayliss. Everybody who's known me over the years knows that I'll always argue the case for the youngsters, and I will say this, they didn't do themselves any great favours yesterday, but I couldn't understand what the formation was, what the hell was supposed to be going on. They were being played out of position, there was no cohesion, the movement wasn't fluid, it was just diabolical to watch it unfold. The defence was completely out-muscled by those bulky Wycombe forwards, so Gareth Ainsworth knew exactly what he was doing. Still on players, I should mention Alex Neil's favourites. Well, he certainly lambasted, or the implication was there he was lambasting those three youngsters. Nothing was said about Brown. Brown came on with 45 minutes to go, as I've mentioned already, and he didn't have any impact on the game whatsoever. But the point I'm making here is, will he also be criticising his favourites of Brown, Maguire and Hughes? I don't think so. I think his venom from the FA Cup is directed at the young lads, unfortunately. And that is awful bad man management. He will not be able to motivate those players now. He's probably finished them off. Mistakes made by the club. David Nugent. We all now know David Nugent was not an Alex Neil or a Peter Ridsdale signing. He was a Trevor Hemmings signing. That one mistake has cost the club £1 million in wages. Truly unforgivable. When I first heard about the interest in David Nugent at the age of 34, I could not believe what I was hearing. Another mistake, this is perhaps the biggest one of the lot, 18-year-old Ty Dolan. Only North End could produce the best, most naturally gifted, young, talented player with God-given skills, the best youth player we've produced in over 40 years since Tony Morley came through, the winger. Only North End could produce such a player and then proceed to give him away for nothing to local rivals Blackburn Rovers. Apparently Blackburn could not believe their luck and they couldn't sign him fast enough on a free transfer. This decision, I was informed, was taken by Alex Neil. So the buck stops with the manager. In fact, earlier in the season we would have the local media boys and the manager throwing their arms up in the air saying they couldn't understand why North End couldn't break defences down, particularly at home. The reason being, just to summarise why they couldn't break defences down, it's so easy to see that it beggars belief that nobody mentioned it is because we no longer play with the flair players we've produced. That being Harrop, that being Bayliss, who should have been given the opportunity much earlier, and that being Dolan, who shouldn't have been booted out of the club. These three players have, or would have had, the natural, God-given ability to go past players with ease and to carve open opposing defences. You can't open up opposing defences by playing the ball 5 yards backwards or 5 yards sideways. That is not football as I know it, and as I mentioned before, it's extremely dull and boring to watch. Third huge mistake, Ched Evans, 32-year-old forward from Fleetwood Town, that being Fleetwood from the division underneath North End, where apparently I think he's scored about 5 goals this season. He is not the answer to the forward problem. We need somebody young and mobile up front who can actually create opportunities for himself. Ched Evans will be a huge mistake. The only way this could now justify Alex Neil making this decision, it was an Alex Neil decision, I was told, from a very good source. The only way that can be justified now is if Evans bangs in something like 6 goals and enables us to go up into the top 6 challenging positions, which I honestly can't see happening. Can't see it at all. Local media. So this, I'm referring here to the Lancashire Post, Dave Seddon, Radio Lancashire, Andy Bays, and the 3 guys from the Finney. One of the outspoken guys there being Ollie, whose comments I don't agree with at all. So just to take these 3 departments to task, the Lancashire Post, Dave Seddon, I contacted him during the summer about Ty Dolan leaving the club, asked if he would run a story about me and any other North End fans volunteering to pay the wages for 1 season of Ty Dolan. I didn't really want to give my own money to do this, but I was prepared to do it, and the reasoning behind that was I wanted really to try and shame the club into signing Dolan, into giving him the deal that he had actually earned over the 2-3 years he'd been with North End. During that time, for you guys who didn't see him out there, believe me, he was outstanding. He was a joy to watch. He put you on the edge of your seat. Anyway, Dave Seddon didn't want to run the story, so I couldn't get word out there to North End fans who might have been interested in paying his wages. What I did instead, I contacted a German friend of mine, a business associate as well, sent him the footage of Ty Dolan in action. Within half an hour, my German friend had got back to me, asked me how much the wages were, and immediately told me, put me down for half the money, negotiate a deal with the club, and I'll pay his wages along with you and take it from there. Unfortunately, by the time I got through to the club Ridsdale, I was informed Alex Neil's decision. Dolan had left the club on a free transfer and was immediately snapped up by Blackburn Rovers. This being Blackburn, who have an infinitely better youth academy than that of North End. They know a young player when they see one. And as I mentioned earlier, they couldn't sign him up fast enough. They could not believe their luck. Rovers are now talking about Dolan in a couple of years' time being worth several £1 million. So if you are listening, Alex Neil, you have lost the club several £1 million over the next few years. That is not a funny situation. Radio Lancashire. I showed the audacity of trying to contact Andy Bays by phone instead of by email, and my request was that the BBC reporters show a little bit more, well, not venom, that's too strong, but be a little bit stronger in their questioning of Alex Neil. And I also asked if it would be possible to reintroduce the phone-in after the games for the fans. That's not just for North End fans, that would be for Blackpool, Burnley and Blackburn Rovers fans, because it was very popular. And also to reintroduce the occasional, one could call it, crisis debate or discussion in the studios when fans could vent their venom about things going wrong at their local club. Anyway, this ultimately was referred on to the Northwest controller for the BBC, a chap called Andy Bowman. Why that happened, I don't know. And when things weren't happening fast enough, I was pushing a little bit more. And in the end, what happened, I had some BBC enforcer who contacted me. This was after I'd asked if I could meet Andy Bays face to face to actually discuss the phone-ins and how they could reorganise the local football format. And I was threatened with the police. So this is how your BBC licence money is used. So I'd say shame on you, Andy Bays and Andy Bowman, because it was a simple request. Could you reintroduce the football phone-in? Could you reintroduce, when needed, the crisis debates in the studio? And could you be a little bit more searching with your questioning of Alex Neil? Now, I come from the position of this. When you've got a manager of a club like North End, Alex Neil, who's earning reportedly over £700,000 a year, for me, it goes with the territory that you're going to be open to searching questions being put to you. I'm not in a deferring mode, doffing my cap. I'd certainly like to face Alex Neil in a direct debate and ask him some searching questions, because that's not happening so far. And I think the answers would be quite interesting. On to Trevor Hemmings himself. On the PNE message board, you get many fans on there arguing and criticising against Hemmings, that he's not putting enough money into the club. Well, let me make it clear from the outset, I'm not particularly a Trevor Hemmings fan. However, credit where it's due. He is currently investing something like £6 million a year in the club. And Billy Mack, who's a North End fan like myself, informs me that because of corporate tax, that nets out to something like about £4.5 million that's actually being put into the club. Notwithstanding that, I would say over the next 2 years with COVID seasons, we'll call them COVID seasons, for 2 seasons it looks like Mr. Hemmings is going to be putting £10 million into the club each season. That is a significant amount of money. Without that level of investment, I don't think Preston North End would be at this level. We'd be down in the first or the second division. And I'd just like to emphasise one point here to those critics of Hemmings and the amount of money he puts in there. So I've written it out. The key players we've sold since Alex Neil has been in charge have been Hugill for a net of £8 million, Robinson we netted £6 million, and Cunningham £3 million. That totals something like £17 million. So that's the incoming money. Going out, for those of you who said Hemmings doesn't invest, we've brought in the following players: Ripley, Hughes, Ledson, Story, Stockley, Burke, Potts, Rees, Ginnerly, Rafferty, Bowden, Malt, Simpson, Bayliss, Nugent and Sinclair. According to my calculations, the total amount invested there by Mr. Hemmings is something like £12 million. Because let's make one thing clear. One day when Mr. Hemmings leaves the club, it's now become apparent that the Hemmings family will not be putting in the same level of investment, if any investment at all. So what should have happened by now is our good old friend Peter Ridsdale should have made the club self-financing. It isn't. And I don't think, contrary to what a lot of people say, it's a particularly well-run club. What should have happened is, and a lot of you will start groaning when you're hearing this, those who know me over the years and criticise me, is we should have been going for the trader concepts used so beautifully by Brentford, who have been able to not only build a team that almost made it into the Premiership last season, but they've also been able to build a completely new stadium from scratch, all done on the back of a similar trader concept to what I've been advocating all these years. I would argue It's the only way forward for this club, whereby, for those of you who don't understand what it's all about, what I'm talking about, whereby we identify young quality players from lower divisions or cast-offs from the Premiership, sign them, develop them and sell them over a 3-year period. Then we reinvest the money that we've made on them and follow the same cycle through again, until finally we're generating enough of a war chest to mount a proper assault on a promotion campaign, and we really go for it. That is the only way forward for Preston North End. Any of you critics out there disagreeing with me and trying to shout me down now, I would like you to take me on and tell me what your alternative is. Let me tell you now, there isn't one. It doesn't exist. This is how the club has to become self-financing. Brentford did it, we can do it. But we don't seem to have the will to actually do this. We've only done it in parts. To conclude at this stage, this first podcast, and as I say, I don't know if I'm going to do another one, but I wanted to get some things off my chest. Most of you will have inferred from my comments that I'm not an Alex Neil fan. I would argue he's had 3 years upon which to impress his style of play on the team. After those 3 years, you can sit me down and I can't tell you what our style of play is, what it's supposed to be. And it certainly isn't enjoyable to watch. The solution to me is I want Alex Neil to do extremely well from now till the end of the season, so that hopefully Celtic will appoint him as their new manager. And the man to replace him for me, it's obvious. It's Gareth Ainsworth. Even if Wycombe go down, he's performed a minor miracle with that club, where not only did he have his reserve team taken away from him at one stage, he had his youth system completely dismantled. So he took them up into the same division as North End on peanuts. And then in that game, the FA Cup game, they played us off the park. In his favour, I think Ainsworth has a natural charisma, and I think he's certainly a motivational manager. He's something to look forward to working with for the young players, and I think he could get inside their heads and he could genuinely push them forwards and develop them. And one of the most important points is Gareth Ainsworth would reintroduce something that's been missing from North End, from the club and the fans for about 15 years, which is a rapport, a link between club, manager, the club and the fans. It doesn't exist anymore. There is no atmosphere on Deepdale anymore. Gareth Ainsworth could turn that around, hitting the ground immediately. The fans would really become the 12th man. The place would be lit up. There'd be a lot of excitement. If it wasn't Gareth Ainsworth, the other two I'd go for or consider certainly interviewing would be Mike Flynn, who's performed a minor miracle at Newport County, and possibly Mark Robbins at Coventry City, who plays the style of football I want to see. So to summarise that, a lot of you North End fans, I think the Ollie character from the Finney, I think he'd prefer to see North End under Alex Neil finishing 8th, playing dull, boring, turgid football, whereas I'd prefer to see us finishing, say, 5 positions lower, playing fast, attractive football, where we actually manage to get more than one shot on target after the first 45 minutes of a game. That, for me, is an unacceptable style of play. I can't watch it, I won't watch it. So those are my comments, those are my views. We'll see if anybody wants to take me on. I throw it open now to Dave Seddon at the Lancashire Post. If you're not happy with what I've said, take me on in live debate. Radio Lancashire, Andy Bays, if you're not happy, get me on your show and you can take me on. And similarly, particularly with the from the Finney, you three guys who are extremely pro Alex Neil, he can do nothing wrong in your eyes. I throw down the gauntlet now that you take me on and possibly it would make it even better, not just myself, but also Billy Mack as well. 2 of us against 3 of you. So that's 2 Neil out against 3 Neil in, and we'd have a humdinger of a debate that I'm sure many fans would find very interesting and highly entertaining. And we'll see who can out-argue who. I'll leave that with you. So thanks.